Hey everyone, Casella here. As this episode comes out, we've got about 9 days left in ARB's first annual fundraiser, and our first big stretch goal looks like it is in reach. Thank you so much if you've already chipped in, and we would be so thankful if you help spread the word for the last little sprint. We hope you're enjoying the kind of criticism and discussion you can find at the magazine and here on A Meal of Thorns. We want to keep them going, and we rely on your support to do so. Okay, on to the show. A critic is a creature who has views quite like a camel's. Flowers and fruit he scorns. In the flower garden of the honeyed muse, he starves unless he finds a meal of thorns. Hello, and welcome to A Meal of Thorns, a critical book club from the Ancillary Review of Books. I'm Jake Casella-Brookins. Every 2 weeks, we ask a writer, critic, or scholar of some type to talk us through a work of speculative fiction. Today, we are reading Joe Clayton's 1982 fantasy novel MOONGATHER, the first in her Duel of Sorcery series, and I am delighted to have Molly Templeton here to discuss. Molly is a reviewer and editor. You can read much of her writing about SFF at Reactor Magazine, including her extremely good column, Mark as Read. Molly also does some work for the Ursula K. Le Guin Foundation and is the administrator for the very cool Le Guin Prize. Molly, thanks so much for joining.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, how are you doing?
I'm doing as okay as one can be doing at this moment in time.
Yeah, it's as I have been saying before every episode, there's like a bigger and bigger asterisk on every conversation about how things are going.
It expands.
Yeah, right. Kurt Vonnegut fans, make of that what you will. Oh, I forgot to ask when we were setting up and talking. Are you still a member of the Most Fun Cult?
Oh, the This Year Cult?
Yeah.
Yes. I was going to ask you, I almost don't want to say this in public, but I'm going to. Are you aware of the very best This Year book club?
I know that there's like a YouTube-ish kind of thing, but...
Yes. It exists entirely in the comments on the YouTube videos for each day's song, and it is magical.
So if folks are not familiar, this is John Darnielle's This Year, which is 365 entries about Mountain Goats songs. We're recording this on Cold Milk Bottle, whose entry says, among other things, kindness and violence are not two sides of the same coin. And we're releasing this episode on First Few Desperate Hours, whose entry says, among other things, that when their stuff shows up, it's clear that they've failed to leave their old selves behind.
Oh, I feel a little dragged by that one. I don't know.
Right. Me too. But we'll friends, look for us in the YouTube comments. We'll be there. Before we jump into MOONGATHER, anything else interesting you have been reading or working on?
I am currently staring at my copy of Claire North's Slow Gods because I recently read it for a somewhat late review, as happens these times, and I don't know what to think about it. So I'm in that phase of just chewing. I can't start a new book yet because I'm not done chewing on the old book, but I have a pile of things. But that is a very interesting book, and I didn't see a lot of talk about it when it came out. It seems to be rising up now, which is interesting.
Yeah, we ran I want to say a somewhat late review at ARB, and then I've been seeing a lot of people chatting about it, just various places. It's basically like a space opera kind of setup, right?
Yeah, it's what made me realize that, I actually love space opera, which I didn't know about myself, which makes zero sense. How do I not know that about myself? It is extremely space opera, but Slow Gods is a slow burn. I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah, I've got that's been climbing on my like TBR list. I didn't get around to it when it came out, but I think I need to. I'm also a big space opera fan, and I always kind of like, it's one of those subgenres that I always kind of like think is dead, and then I'm reminded like, oh no, actually there's tons of good stuff on this all the time. So
yeah, it feels like it just kind of keeps existing in the background, even if it's not being talked about. Which good for it.
There's so much stuff. I feel like Gary Wolfe and Jonathan Strand were talking about this a little bit ago about the way that how speculative fiction has like thought about empire is like really still having a moment. Like I think we're probably like a decade into maybe like a really serious run. I'm thinking of like, Arkady Martine and Leckie's work. Like there's a lot of people like really, really, really thinking about this stuff. And space opera is definitely like one of the homes where some of that thought happens.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out, talking to my partner last night, because I feel very frustrated lately with how I feel like the stakes are too high in too many books. Like people are just ratcheting up the stakes incessantly, and I get bored. But I don't feel that way about space opera, I think, because the celestial scale of it, Like the stakes are often not human created in some way that makes it more interesting to me. I don't know.
Like something about like setting sort of like the game board much bigger makes like
Yeah.
the heightened stakes sort of make more sense as opposed to sort of like a nonsensical, like the sun's going to blow up kind of plot.
Or like the most powerful villain of all is going to murder everyone. And you're like, cool, everybody's dead because you don't actually have any power to fight that guy. I don't know.
Interesting. I share the chewing problem when I get stuck on a review, and I hate it. Because basically my only real relaxation activity is reading. Like the other things I do are just kind of like, I just kind of need to turn my brain off for a little bit. So I'll watch something or play a game or something. But when I actually want to relax, I want to read a book.
Yep.
But I can't read anything new when I'm working on a review. So if I like get blocked on a review, I like can't do it and also can't read anything to relax. And so it's terrible. I hate that.
Yep. I have literally been stomping around Hyrule, killing all of the monsters in Tears of the Kingdom because I can't. I don't know what else to do with myself. I've already done this. This is round 2. I don't need to kill every monster for a little tacky medal, but it's what I'm doing.
Well, best of luck. I think I've been reading. It's been good. Oh, well, you know, I'm not totally done with it yet, but I'm reading Violet Allen's Prism Plastic Void. Have you seen this?
I have not.
Yeah, I want to say it's coming out in May from Little Puss Press, which I think that's Casey Plett's. It's phenomenal. I've just been like blown away by it.
Cool.
It's a kind of I hate doing the comp game. I hate the comp game.
I know.
But it's a little bit like if someone heard This Is How You Lose the Time War described in a bar and then tried to recreate it in the mode of like Rakesfall with like a heavy dash of We the Parasites. It's like extremely erudite. Like it's like just packed with references and footnotes. It's doing a ton of like visual play. Like it presents the text in different ways and different colors and boxes and framing and stuff.
Oh, I love that.
But it's this like multi-dimensional twisted love story thing. And I'm like laughing and snorting and kind of like aghast at it on every single page. Yeah, it's been great.
I have not heard of that. I'm not always so up on what's coming because I'm not like a full-time critic, so I don't get a lot of galleys, oddly enough. I'm usually like a year behind because that's where the prize sits. So
well, you know, we'll talk more about the prize at the end because I want people to make sure they know about it. But let's get into this book. So today we're talking about Joe Clayton's Moongather. This was published in 1982 by Daw Books. I have the iconic yellow mass market version right here.
I'm so glad you got the paper copy.
It is. I should tell the listeners that it is available now in a Kindle version from I can't remember the name of the press.
Open Road.
Yeah.
With a terrible cover. I'm mad about it.
The cover is grim, but at least it is available. I don't know about you, but I get this like panicky feeling when I buy a mass market online, and the panicky feeling is like I can see like 2 are left. You know, like at the used book seller, and I'm like, oh man, I don't know how many are out there total. Like.
I will say I was looking at Joe Clayton on eBay because I want to fill in all the gaps of the books I had as a kid that I don't have now. There's plenty.
Okay.
I mean, maybe not forever, but it seems like there's a few. Yeah.
I remember reading somewhere on one of those threads on Blue Sky or something where, the prompt was like, tell me something that everyone in your field knows, but people outside your field don't think about much. And someone who was an archivist said something to the effect of, I can't remember the exact date, but they were like, any book published after like 1920 or whatever, like when they changed the acid paper format, will basically be dust within 100 years no matter what we do. But books published before that, we actually don't have an expiration date on them as long as they're well preserved, like because they're just blocks of wood. I thought that was kind of fascinating.
That's so depressing.
As a lot of my like paperbacks from like the 60s and 70s that I bought used start to like just literally just like fragment when I not even like tear, but just like shatter. That's something I worry about. But let's. Where's my summary here? I got distracted by this lovely yellow mass market. So I'm going to summarize this way. I'm going to say it's a fantasy novel in a fully secondary world. It follows a character named Soroy, a woman with some sort of magical powers, who gets caught up in a magical and political plot. The chapters alternate between Soroy as an adult and as a child when she was adopted and exploited by a powerful magician. Joe Clayton, for those who don't know, was a prolific science fiction and fantasy author, publishing 34 novels and a large number of short stories, and Moongather is the first of a trilogy. So Molly, this was your pick. We talked about quite a bunch of stuff, a number of them kind of like in this vague era of sort of like 80s paperback fantasy. Tell me tell me why Moongather. Tell me about your relationship with it, or Clayton's work sort of more broadly.
Well, I grew up in sci-fi fantasy in the sense that my mom is a huge reader and had like a giant wall of yellow mass market paperbacks when I was a kid, and I could read whatever I wanted. And of course, being like 9 or 10, I chose by cover a lot, as one does. And the cover for Jo Clayton's maybe more well-known, if she's well-known, series, the Diadem series that begins with Diadem from the Stars. That cover has this very attractive woman with a cool, and the air quotes I'm making right now, for the 80s outfit on, and Diadem sounded really cool to me. So I tried to read that series, and early on, there's an extremely traumatizing scene in which the main character's pet is pregnant, and an enemy kills it and does something horrible with it. And I was like, I can't read this. I can't read this. I'm so upset about this. I'm still to this day incapable of reading a lot of animal harm, which we'll get to in this book at some point. But I don't know, something about the way that Jo Clayton wrote women. I mean, I wasn't reading this. I was reading this in maybe the late 80s, early 90s. I don't remember exactly when. And, you know, we talk a lot about, at least in the genre, we talk a lot about gender and how it was represented. And something about Soroy just clicked in for me. I loved her as a character. I loved this setup where she's kind of a chosen one, but she doesn't know she's a chosen one. And it's not really a good kind of chosen. And it felt very, I mean, when I read it as a kid, I think it felt relatable, which is kind of a weird thing to say about a green girl with magic, psychic, animal summoning powers. But I liked her and I liked the world.
That's cool. Yeah. So this was my first time reading this. Lots of thoughts about this. This was a fun read. I think just interesting, kind of thinking genre history wise. Just this sort of like size and approach to fantasy. Like, I know this is like part of a larger arc, but this, on the one hand, like lengthwise, this feels more like the kind of novella that's coming out today, right? Like,
Yeah.
It's like 200 and some pages. But in terms of what it's doing and sort of how quickly it's establishing itself, it feels very different than that. Than fantasy novellas published today.
Oh, yeah.
I was thinking a lot about its approach to how it handles characters, how it handles, big scare quotes on this, how it handles world building.
Yeah.
Feels very different than, I don't know, the formulas and conventions that I've sort of gotten used to in fantasy, including some that started like not long after this. Like I probably read more mass market fantasy that was in kind of like the early 90s period. So this is like a little bit before that. And this just feels really different in a couple ways that I was having a hard time putting my finger on. But one thing being that, you know, people who, you know, critics and reviewers and readers who I talk to a lot, where we like a lot of weird fiction, we like stuff that throws you in without explaining, as opposed to the more sort of like wiki-eyes, sort of like lore-based kind of approach to things, right?
Yeah. This one definitely drops you in without explaining anything. You're just in it.
You're just in it, but it's also, it's so strange because to me it feels like it almost like breaks that dichotomy.
Yeah.
Because it's putting in so many little things that feel like they should be explained or could be explained, or it sort of like feels like it almost expects you to know, like, for example, all the animal names, right? So there's like, there's Vinets and Makais and Jamats and Chinai and like all of these creatures, none of them describe very like completely. Like you get like enough to kind of be like, oh, that's kind of horse-like, that's kind of dog-like. But it never like sits down and like explains things to you.
No.
But it has all of these, and so that's a feature of that sort of like drop you into an explain style. But the way that it's peppered with proper names and kingdoms and histories and religions and all these things are sort of named really quickly, feels like the more, you know, kind of like, you know, Brandon Sanderson-esque sort of lore-based kind of thing, except he's not explaining any of it.
It feels kind of like a hybrid to me also. I thought about that. I thought about how, like, I mean, this is very specific, but the back cover copy, what it describes to you happens 3/4 of the way through the book. I literally read the cover copy and went, wait, I'm supposed to know about a murder plot? No, the murder plot is not described until 3/4 of the way through the book. But that's what they put on here because I don't know. I mean, I also thought a lot about what publishing must have been like in 1982, but I think maybe what you put your finger on there is what people, at least some people, talk about or mean when they talk about missing that 90s fantasy sense, is that like the place between the weird throws you into it and now I'm going to detail the lineage of this kingdom for 400 pages. Not exactly, but like there is a space in between those two things that they don't have to be separate. And a lot of the fantasy I read back then is just like, well, here you go. You're in this world. You're going to have to figure it out. And, you can look at it as challenging or unwelcoming, or I thought a lot about how much Clayton trusts her readers.
Mm-hmm.
You drop in and she trusts that you're going to be interested in Cherryh. She trusts that you're going to follow her across the world in this little boat, which I kept thinking about Earthsea with the boat scenes. I was like, Joe Clayton definitely read A Wizard of Earthsea. She trusts that you're going to figure out what the animals are. She trusts that you're going to be willing to, there's just so much trust in this kind of writing.
If the weird, totally unexplained versus the over-explained poles are kind of one thing that this is weirdly splitting, another one that this split for me is the more mythic, fable-like Earthsea kind of fantasy versus maybe a more Dungeons and Dragons inflected kind of thing.
Yeah.
This has a lot of very Earthsea-ish feeling stuff in it.
Mm-hmm.
The boat's big, the way that the magic, at least the Norris's, who's the evil magician, the words, speaking the words is the magic system feels a lot like that. Little background details about how some of these kind of gender-based religion/political things work feels kind of Le Guin-ish. But then the way that people's races and almost classes are described.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Cherryh has this sort of she's sort of a, I don't know, some sort of ranger thief hybrid, right? It has this very kind of again, this very stock, very 80s, 90s. They're wearing leather. You kind of know what's in their inventory. Right. You kind of know what their abilities are,
Totally.
kind of thing. But again, it's sitting not even between, but sort of off to the side of that thing that's it's very different.
I think that also is what drew me to this book as a kid. I had read some Forgotten Realms books, and I'd read Tolkien and Earthsea, and I was just trying to find what I wanted. And I think this series, all these things that we're talking about are what made it so interesting to me as a young reader who was finding what I wanted to read, because it was pulling from everywhere. It was a little bit of everything without feeling like some kind of messy stew.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a kitchen sink book. It all fits together, but it has that. The animal magic, too, I think is so, and her relationship to animals was something that, even though it gets terribly used against her, I looked for that in books, I think, probably because of Get and the Otak.
Yeah, no, hard same. That's something that really, really appealed to me when I was reading fantasy, and it's something that, appealed to me now reading this. I quote it a lot, but there's a bit in Tolkien's on fairy stories where he talks about the desire for communion with other living things being at the heart of fairy. And I want to befriend strange creatures.
Yes.
That's what I want. And so reading about, particularly in the scenes where Cherryh is a child, I can imagine reading that as a kid. I just would have been all about that.
Oh my God, all of her little petulant rebellions against Ser Norris are so enjoyable. I'm so curious what, I read this book, like I said, in the 80s or 90s. I don't remember. And I was probably 12, maybe, I'm not sure. But what was it like for you reading it, 40 years after publication as an adult? How did it appear to you?
I think the big thing is, besides these sort of interesting, genre history things we're talking about, kind of sits there. I was fascinated by that. But I think one of the things that struck me the most reading it was this is approaching very serious topics, both positively and negatively, in a way that I don't feel like I see very often. It has this sort of frank, open sexuality.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like there's a lot of science fiction and fantasy, particularly stuff from roughly this period, that feels kind of vaguely horny. And it's not that this is a non-horny book, but that's not really how it's working. It, without ever standing on a soapbox and facing the camera, it's really transparent about Cherryh's desperate need for human attachment, throughout her life, in this way that is open and bisexual, but it's also very transparent about how easily that can lead her kind of in bad directions, right? By forming attachments to people she shouldn't. And it's just really strange and fascinating. It has this sort of, casualness is not quite the right word, but I was thinking about towards the end of the plot when she sleeps with the innkeeper spy guy, Copperick, and it's this very interesting sort of non-romantic but loving, just I need connection right now.
One of my most hated scenes in movies and TV is when a woman, it's usually a woman, and it's usually a woman who's messy or trouble, has the like, I just need to feel something sexy. And they always are forced to say that exact line, which like you might feel that, but you're probably not going to say it out loud. This was like the loving, warm, I need human connection inverse of that scene. And it was so interesting to me how it works out.
Yeah, and we haven't talked about, and we don't get a ton in this book either about the, I'm not sure how to pronounce this, the Mei?
I've always said it may, but I don't have any idea how you're supposed to say it.
I'll say the Mei and the Berserker, which is like this order.
I sort of think of them as warrior nuns, even though they're obviously
Warrior
not nuns.
yeah.
They're certainly not celibate, but they have, it's almost like it is a religious order.
Feels like in the background, it's not very like foreground here, but they have some sort of like radical, like bodily sexual openness kind of thing that's just really interesting. And it's not super foregrounded. But so when Soroi sleeps with this sort of ally who's like, I believe he's like connected to the Berserker somehow, right?
Yeah, he's like one of their spies, like informants, helpers. He's in their network.
It has this interesting, really like, again, it's this very open, very caring but casual, interesting approach to sex.
Yeah.
And then like a chapter or two later, the Domnor, like the like, is he like kind of like a king kind of guy?
I think he's like a lord. Yeah.
Who she's rescued, is just like making out with her and like really like skeeving on her. But she's kind of like, this is kind of okay, I guess, but we got to focus on what's at hand.
Right. We're very busy right now, sir.
Yeah. And it's so strange. Like that scene could so easily have been like a really negative thing about his character.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not that it's like utterly embraced, but she's also like, oh yeah, this attractive, powerful guy's kind of into me. Like it's this very interesting.
That is.
It's not totally played for laughs. It's just this sort of like odd openness about sexuality that I don't see very often.
I love that you mentioned both of those things, because when I was thinking about this book, I was thinking about how, like, I don't think I was oblivious to how gay it was when I was a kid. I was like, okay. And then just kept going. But reading it now, the scene with I can't remember his name, Coperick, is so lovely. And like you were saying, so warm and so like, human and comforting and physical. And then when the Domnor shows up, I was like, what? Why is this happening? It almost felt like a weird, like, movie studio note. Like, make this more like Game of Thrones or something. Like, it doesn't, the vibe of it is so different. And I haven't reread the rest of them yet, so I can't remember if it goes anywhere.
Well, and that those kind of close out the adult plot line. And so like we're talking about a woman, having sexual interactions with two men, and that's really overlays how like incredibly gay this is, like on the other 218 pages of this book.
It's very gay.
But again, even there, like just how open it is and how like focused it is on like actual touch. I think a lot about like how a lot of quote unquote, I hate the term, but spicy scenes in particularly in speculative fiction are often kind of bodiless.
Yeah, this is very physical
And very concerned on like wanting to be touched, where I want to be touched, how I want to be touched, with who, all throughout. And I also think there's something really interesting, and reading it now to me feels like a little scary and a little brave about how open it is about children being sexual beings too, or like having like the roots of that too, right? Where like when she is 8, she's strong. It's not like this book does not contain like sex with children, but like it's very open about the way that like there is this line between the desire for affection and closeness, and how that develops in other things when you get older, in a way that just feels really interesting to me. And the intense desire that Soroi has for connection when she's a child, with what reading now is like, holy crap, this is such an abusive, just a almost like perfect archetype of an abusive relationship. But how much she really craves real connection. Then when she finds other people, right, when she escapes, like, again, still basically as a child, how much she wants to be near them and be touched. And it's not quote unquote sexual, but you can see the through line from there to this like open sexuality later in this way that I think is really interesting. Yeah,
and I think it's also interesting how she has these two people who are sort of, it was funny when you said game board earlier in this conversation, because there is literally a game board at one point in this book where the two main powers are using Soroi as a literal pawn. But, Sarnoris is the abusive relationship guy, and he withholds touch from her, right? And he gives her all these animals that she can love and then takes them away and destroys them. And when she eventually escapes him and finds her way to Reiki Janja, the other power, there's so much contact. There's hugging and there's physicality in a way that I don't think she draws attention to, but Soroy doesn't have to ask for it. Like just the healthier relationship there immediately involves physical touch, contact, expressions of love, and she doesn't have to ask. And I find that really, like you said, it's all very emotionally open.
Yeah, and I don't know, I thought that was great and connected to this like fluid sexuality throughout in this way that just reads kind of genuine. Much of the way that this novel on a plot level, like sort of structurally, it's one of the things it's sort of like hanging off is that childhood abuse and like how do we do something about that? But the other one being about Soroy's betrayal or quote unquote betrayal of Tyann, right? Of like running away out of fear, out of that trauma response. And the extent to which we don't see a ton of Soroy's relationship with Tyann, but the book has done so much work elsewhere with this openness and this sort of like emotional and sexual groundwork that I can buy that relationship is really real and that's going to hang over. Even though, again, like we get very, very, very little of them on the page together, but it doesn't feel like what they call like a fridging, where it's just like a disposable kind of death. It doesn't feel like that at all, even though there's so little of it.
I thought about that a lot too, and about how fridging is common and the whole bear your gaze trope is common, but a trope is a negative thing when it's handled poorly. Like you can have a story where a gay character dies and it is not handled dismissively or just loosely or disrespectfully, honestly. And I had that little moment in the beginning where I was like, oh, right. But it does, like you said, that relationship exists. It's present for her all the time. And then you get to the end and it's obviously a flashback where you get to spend more time with Tyann. I was so interested in how the book is so open about why she runs away. Like, I feel like a modern book now, she'd run away and you'd be like, no, wait, what's wrong with you? Go back. But it's just like she has this panic response about a Norid and about what she's been through. There's no coyness about the trauma.
And I really I liked how it handled that. It really holds at once, like you, the reader, immediately know why she's running away, right? And like fully kind of understand that. So it kind of like holds that, and like you, the reader, obviously are able to like not hold that against her, but you can also understand how like this is a thing that she thinks of obviously as a failing and as a cowardice, right? And a betrayal. And it just, I don't know, it's kind of like deftly done to let you see what's really going on, but also like not dismiss how she conceives of that herself.
Yeah. It's also just such an interesting place to start.
Yeah.
We have no idea what's happening, why they're running away, why, like I think Tyann already has a crossbow quarrel in her leg at the opening, and then it's just Soroy on the run. It's so, I don't know. I feel like a book now would be like, Soroy was a small child. Like we would have this whole intro part. Well, it doesn't really start there. It starts with the Ser Norris and Reiki Janja, but for Soroy, it begins with this new moment of trauma that doesn't define her.
Well, and it goes back to that, like this kind of like odd place that sits in between throwing you in and filling in the details, where I feel like if you started this book now today, even if you started it in media res, you would then jump back to a way that would start to fill that in more concretely. And this immediately goes into this dual temporal structure.
Yeah.
Right? Which was fascinating. I know like this is not a new technique and it wasn't new then, but I don't know that I've ever run into an earlier book that so clearly sets up the alternating timeline where you have a relatively short chapter in this present time, and then you jump back an X amount of time. And I was thinking about how much I see that now, as like a way to. I often get a little irked by it because it often feels like a way to inject a really false sense of suspense, right? To use a non-literary example, because I always think of when this comes up, is the Arrowverse TV shows.
Yes, I am very familiar.
Where in the first couple of seasons of them, they were weirdly overcommitted to this dual structure. Like, even when it didn't make sense, they're like, we got to have two plots.
We got to go back to the island.
One of them's got to be 10 years ago, and one of them's got to be now. We got to do it. And it creates these basically kind of like go-to-commercial break suspense that don't quite make sense in world. But this didn't feel fake to me that way, but having that really strict structure, I thought was really neat. And also how much of her, of Soroi in the present tense, in the adult timeline, is so you're in this action-packed political magical intrigue with like nations and countries you don't really understand, and like other creatures and magical beings you don't quite understand, and it's very plotty, right? It's like we got to get from here to there, and these people are trying to stop us, and then all this stuff happens. And then in the child version, how much of that is, even though there are other characters and things are happening, how much that kind of draws kind of a circle around Soroi, and you're kind of just with her.
Yeah.
And you really get to kind of focus on her, but at this very different point in her life. I thought it was an interesting technique.
I think so too. And I think that part of what, when I don't like that back and forth technique is when the flashbacks seem determined to explain the present. When there's a 1-to-1 ratio, here's the thing that happens. Let's go back and show you why this person is like this. Like the phrase I always use when I'm mad at prequels is stop explaining and start exploring. Like I hate Solo because all it wanted to do was explain things to me that didn't need to be explained. Like I don't need to know, oh, you're alone, your name is Solo. Like that's just pointless, but there's so much in his...
Why does he have a stripe on his pants?
Why?
And it flashes back to like when they sewed the stripe on the pants.
Right. Like there's a huge difference between explaining and exploring. And I think that this book, the whole past is exploring the forces that shaped Soroi and how she responded to them. Like how it's so much about her like innate stubbornness, which of course I really appreciate, a super stubborn character.
Yeah. I mean, especially like the child character, like who like has cool magical powers, right? And has like cool things she can do, but the book doesn't give her powers that actually overwhelm the adult.
No.
Right?
No.
And so it makes which right, a lot of kids' books do, right? You give kids power that let them triumph over the adults, and that's fun to read as a kid. But this is interesting because she doesn't have that, but she still does resist. She still refuses to be complicit. Potent. Yeah, it just feels powerful.
Some of it is just so basic. Like she just refuses to dress herself. She has these rebellions that are very realistic in the midst of this sea of magic and wizards, and the wizards on an island, which I still am like, where's that? I think the second book has a map in it. The first book does not. But it's all like, she has magic to talk to animals, sort of, but her rebellion is just the physical existence of any kid.
Yeah, no, I love that. And also just so tragic. Just the animal deaths and cruelty in here, just brutal. Even to the cockroach. The cockroach got me.
Oh my God, the cockroach. I've read some pretty good cockroaches, which is a weird thing to say, but this one was a heartbreaker. And yeah, but I do think that I am so sensitive to reading animal cruelty and death in books, but she does it in that way where it's never lascivious, it's never over dwelt upon. It is the straightforward experience of the tragedy. I almost didn't want to read Bora Chung's Midnight Timetable because there were bad animal things in it, but the way she writes it is just like, this is how it was.
It's also, there's I don't want to call it undercooked, but there's in this first one at least, there's this underexplained thread that I was really kind of fascinated every time it kind of came into view of this whole sort of like, basically like life and unlife, right? That Norris has control over the non-living world and wants control over the living world. And so it makes, even though it's like kind of cruel and kind of heartbreaking, it makes all this constant repeated connection with animals, this interesting, like pretty subtle, like counter note. Right? Because like you don't get, again, in the adult plot line, you don't get very clearly on the page this sort of like good and evil, like binary forces opposing each other. But you do keep getting this connection to animals, and it keeps reminding you back to that. There is actually this deeper thing going on underneath it, which I dug. As a random aside, I was also very amused by in one of the sort of minor fight scenes when she and the girl she rescues, Dinafar, are accosted by thugs. And the one is called the Tercel, and he's this huge giant guy. And Tercel is like a falcon, which first off is a strange name for a huge dude, but it was also the name of my first car.
I was going to say, it's a Toyota, right?
Yeah. So every scene where like she kicked the Tercel down, I was like, oh no, Tercel.
It's really funny. I love the things that old books, the like weird quirks of language or made up words that are now words that we use. I can't think of a good example right now, but it definitely happens.
It's also just very funny to me that, and I do mean this kind of genuinely, that there's this sort of like Tolkienian and to some extent Le Guinian approach to language in your books where you like have all your etymologies and your linguistics, right? And then you can just sort of like, and the other side of that maybe is you try to avoid that, right? You try to avoid having a bunch of like distracting fake names,
Yeah.
right?
With apostrophes in them.
And this one just kind of feels like you just kind of like stare into space and you're like, what's that creature called? It's a Jamat.
Yeah. And then you're like, it's kind of like a camel, but probably not exactly.
Yeah. That weird centipede dragon is it's a Glishnacht. And I kind of love it. Like, it's kind of goofy. Like,
what are the horrible like demon lizard flying things? Tyxels or something? They're hard to remember because there's no like system for your brain to latch onto. But I don't really mind that.
To call back the D&D thing, they do feel a little bit like, and then this creature comes out and someone's like, and what's it called? And you have to like stare into space. You're like,
let's rearrange some letters in a world. It's a leafid.
But I dug that. Yeah, that's cool. We haven't talked about the what were they called? The Cherryh?
Oh, I love the Cherryh, which is hard. Again, confusing because now I'm like, oh, like Black Panther. No, a little different.
Oh, right. Yeah. Take your vaccines, people.
The little space, like a little forest cave creatures with big eyes. I was kind of imagining the soot-sprites from Spirited Away, but like very large.
They're up in the mountains, and when they're initially mentioned, I'm like, okay, this is the fair folk. This is like Daemon Scythe, elves kind of things. But then they show up and they feel like they've stepped in from a science fiction book.
Yeah, they do. I mean, there's a science fiction streak in this, I think, like the way that the moons are talked about. This is obviously one planet and they're aware of moons and they're like, there's no spaceships, but it feels like you're in space, which fantasy planets don't always feel like you're in space, even though you would be. Again,
one of the things where I feel like almost any writer writing today would at some point have like, a priest would be like, and as you know, we are here for the Moongather when the 7 moons of yada yada come together. But no one explains it. It's like this huge event in the world.
It's just happening. Yeah.
That there's this highly predictable celestial thing happening that like religions are based around and festivals are based around. And it's never explained.
Nope.
It's never like really laid out for you because Cherryh is like, no, I'm like traveling in disguise. I'm trying to stop this assassination. I don't not care about the moon.
Right. But she's aware. She's like, these things shouldn't be happening at Moongather. It's kind of like solstice, I think. But But yeah, you don't really know what it means.
But the Cherryh, yeah, they have like fluid or shifting genders.
Oh yeah, they change back and forth. She's like very concerned about using the wrong word for the Cherryh because she's not sure which phase it's in. Yeah.
Again, like they have this like sort of elvish quality, but then when they're actually on the page, they feel more like a fully fleshed out like alien creature in this interesting way.
Yeah.
So I do just want to read as an example of the sort of like just throwing you in without explaining it thing. I love this. This is when the Cherryh that Saroy has summoned to guide her through the mountains says, Moongather on Yukchoy has called from earth. A den has it made at Kabil water. The Glishnacht without water wither. The season mother among the first he took. The Katunahan no water to the Glishnacht bring. And is that kind of like, there are like passages in here that are like that. And I always kind of get a kick out of that because that's sort of like unexplained density of made up terms is something, again, that people kind of, I think, avoid now. And I kind of enjoy when it comes up.
Yeah, I like how it highlights how strange they are and how they exist. I don't think Saroy even necessarily knows exactly what all of that means, but she clearly gets the vibe.
And it has that, again, even though it's like done in this, maybe slightly more science fictional feeling way, it definitely has that classic kind of like fair folk, like I need to sort of like earn passage, right, through this natural space that otherwise I'm unable to navigate. I'm thinking of like, who is it? Gone, Berry Gone in the Lord of the Rings, right? Where like you sort of have to like strike a deal with the wild people to like move through this space that otherwise you won't be able to. And it in this like kind of like, I don't know, the plot in the adult line is so sort of like fast and like point to point and stuff happening. It is this sort of like, and there is no map in this one.
Nope.
It is this sort of like reminder that we're in this more than human actual place that I dug.
But while keeping the human, like, I think there's so much, like you're talking about contact and touch and connection earlier, but there's also so much about just being in a body on a terrible road trip on a fantasy horse. Like poor Dinefar is just miserable the entire time. There's so much emphasis on how this is not fun that I found that sort of like just kind of a nice break from all the ones like, yeah, we're going to go on an awesome fantasy road trip and it's going to be great. And everybody can ride horses for 12 hours a day. No problem. Not happening here.
One of the things about reading some of these, like specifically like 80s and 90s fantasy and science fiction Often women writers, I'm not sure what the connection is there, but that take horses actually seriously
Yeah.
instead of like as tropes.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
I was reading C.J. Cherryh's Foreigner again not that long ago, and like they ride these big like giant camel horse things on. It's like it's really serious about like you're gonna get like some blisters, you know, you're
Yep.
gonna have some like deep groin muscle aches, like it's a real thing, and it takes it seriously in this, which is kind of fun.
It just makes me wonder how many 80s fantasy writers were also horse girls. Probably a lot of them.
Yeah. Well, that's a slightly strange place to take a break, but on possible horse girls, let's take a quick break.
Okay.
I was going to grab a quick drink of coffee, and we'll be right back.
All right. I went to see if there's a map in book 3 because book 2 is in the other room, but there is not. But there is a really wonderful what has gone before, like previously on. It's so good. There's, you get a little reminder. Everyone should do that.
Bring those back.
I know.
Publishers,
and I got to say, I have been on my to be read stack is the 3rd book in Bethany Jacobs' Kindom trilogy. Bethany Jacobs
same. Yep.
gets a huge A+ for me because she has synopses on her website.
Yep.
And they're thorough and they're great.
Yep, they're great.
So good. So good. No one is better positioned to write the synopsis than the author.
Yeah. I feel like people lost track of the fact that we're not all teenagers who sit down and read like 9 books a week now. Like, I don't necessarily have time to reread the first 3 when the 4th one comes out.
God, I wish. I always want to, but like, I'm also staring at the Rose Field and thinking about how I wanted to go back and at least reread the other 2 books in that series. I have too many side opinions about that.
Which one? Sorry, I missed the title there.
Philip Pullman, The Rose Field, the 3rd book in his.
Oh, yeah.
I use series in air quotes because it's basically like 3 different. This book feels like it's a whole different thing.
Series synopses, please.
Please tell us what happened.
Tell us what happened. Just a quick refresher. I also think, there's something there. There's something there, too, about that. Let's see if I can frame this thought. The expectation that you can kind of like jump in and sort of like pick up what's going on. How to say this? It feels like it's less invested in a model of sort of like series readership where you have to be a completist. Like I'm thinking about like the number of books or the number of series that I accidentally jumped into later when I was a kid. Because like the first one that I found was the second one or the third one or whatever, A lot of them had a little summary in the front, right? Or they made a point of like, sometimes clunkily, sometimes smoothly, like sort of like catching you up to speed quickly in them, right? Because pre-internet, you might just find this book, and that might be the book you find, the book you read, and you don't want that to totally turn you off. I don't know, there's something there about like the assumption that you will be like a completist and a fan for everything, as opposed to just like, you might just pick this book up and you should be able to maybe hop into it.
It also feels like an assumption by publishing that you need to buy all of these books. Maybe. I don't know. I think about this a lot because I was thinking about how this book came out. There's some moments in this where I had some questions about like who edited it because I just want to know. But 1982, a long time ago, but this book comes out and it says it's a mass market original. And it says on it, the first of a great fantasy trilogy by the author of the Diadem novels, right? So they're obviously publishing 3 of them. This isn't one of those things where like, well, we'll publish one and we'll see how it goes. They just did it. But then I think about like the production costs on these little mass markets back in the 80s versus what we're doing now. And like, I don't know, I've had at least 3 instances in the past year or 2 where I've picked up a book to review and been entirely unaware that it was part of a series. Nowhere on the book did it say so. Nowhere in the press materials, nowhere on the website. And then you get to the end. I mean, the last one I read, I really loved, but the end felt messy. And then I discovered it was a duology. And I was like, but you didn't tell me that. Just tell me.
Shoot, I'm totally blanking on the title of it now, and I really liked it. What's Rebecca Roanhorse's, the like Mesoamerican fantasy series?
Ow.
We'll edit this in and I'll sound smart.
Okay.
Okay, it was Black Sun, the first of the Between Earth and Sky series. I'm really enjoying this big giant book, but there's something really kind of crushing, especially in a longer book, when you get to like page 500 of something you've been really enjoying and realizing like, oh, this is not a complete story, right?
But did it at least tell you at the end of the book that there was going to be a sequel?
Yes, which is good.
Yeah.
But I think there's this sort of like plot level thing where I'm like, oh, this isn't even like a fully contained thing. This is sort of like a preamble. And if you don't know that going in, that's a strange thing to discover.
Yes, but I think it's even stranger when the book doesn't tell you and just thinks that you should read the book without knowing.
There's so many strange things about like publishing and book selling. There's so many weird and kind of shifting forces about how series work in terms of like getting them out to people, right? Like you think about something like this, right? Like I was looking at Clayton's bibliography, and it's 34 books in I think 20 years.
Wild. That's a wild output.
It's wild. And like we're for the podcast, we're setting up a thing on a couple of CJ Cherryh's books where again you're looking at like roughly 1.5 novels a year, right? Just like consistently. You know, thinking about like you're asking like who edited this, right? And like thinking about like Wollheim and Daw, like I mean had taste and had opinions and knew what they wanted to do, but we're also kind of like buying stuff in lots.
Yeah.
They're like, we don't want to publish this novel. We want to publish a chunk of novels.
Yeah.
Whereas today, for lots of reasons, right? Like it's pretty usual to wait way more than a year, right? And if you're a bookstore, you have to make this decision, right? If you have like finite shelf space, it's like, oh, like the third volume of this thing just dropped. It was somewhat popular. Do I stock all 3 again? When number 7's coming out, how many do I stock of the previous 6?
And how much do my booksellers care about this series, and will they hand sell it? And like, yeah.
Right. I remember I was working in a bookstore when the last of the Expanse books came out, which are obviously like right, they're really popular, but it was kind of like, this is a shelf.
It's a mountain. I know.
Like we have to like, you know, like I'm gonna have to remove so much stuff. And is anyone gonna buy? Is it worth getting rid of some other people whose name ends in B or C to carry like book 4 and 5, right? Like
Yeah.
So that people can catch up on whatever the last one is. And it's a tough choice. And when books are coming out at a much faster pace, you can sort of do different things with how the series work based on who's going to pick them up and how.
And yeah, the faster pace, just the sheer number of books in the world. I don't know. I think about all of that stuff. Like when I was a kid, the books in the world were the ones in the library or in the mall bookstore. And that was it. And like, I didn't know anything about how publishing worked. I knew nothing. And I probably read this book when it had been out for a decade. You know, but like we have so much context now, and I'm not sure it's always helpful.
Yeah, no, I agree. I also
just love, this is a really minor point, but this book does not have a dedication. It doesn't have acknowledgments. It's just a book. And it literally ends on the very end. There's no extra pages.
Oh, it's so good.
It just ends. And
yep.
It made me really interested. Like I have tried to read about Jo Clayton online, but there's just not a lot about her.
Yeah.
Which bums me out. I mean, I didn't know she died in Portland, which is where I am now. And then I was like, did she ever meet Ursula? And I don't know. I have no idea of like what the context of her world was other than reading other books from the time. I'm sure people who like went to conventions and were much more involved in that world than 10-year-old me, they probably know some things, but I can't find that stuff.
I mentioned this on another episode, but when I was hunting for this and a couple other books, I went to this big used bookstore over here in Rochester. That's one of those like distressingly packed bookstores, you know, where like kind of anxiety inducing.
Where there's like bookcases, but then there's stacks that are as high as your waist on the floor, and you're like, I'm going to break something.
All the mass markets are double stacked. So like you have to like pull half of them out and risk the shelf falling on you.
Yep.
Yeah. But I was like looking and I was like, you know, I read a lot of science fiction and fantasy. I read a lot about science fiction and fantasy. And I'm seeing authors here who have, presumably, their incomplete catalog here, right? This is just a random used bookstore. And there's like 10, 15, 20 books by this author I've never heard of.
Yep.
And it's just, you start getting this sort of like Library of Alexandria feeling about just how much information, you know, and how many of these artists, you know, varying degrees of skill, you know, who had readers who loved them and who had fans.
Yeah.
And are just sort of like, it's hard to even rediscover. And if no one has done the scholarly work to put together a biography and a bibliography, like it's so easy to lose that info. Yeah, I was trying to look up stuff about Clayton before this episode and like, I just couldn't find very much.
There's just not anything. I mean, now I'm like, I desperately want to reread read. I've read like 34 books. I probably read 4 or 5 trilogies, but I want to read them all. I want to go back to the Diadem books, which were like kind of hard for my brain when I was a kid, and see if I can make more sense of them. I found fantasy much easier as a child than science fiction. And now I'm like both, everything.
I think I definitely had a shift there too as I grew up a little more. I don't know what that's about. And there might be something there that like we've talked about the desire for like animal connection and some of the kind of, not in the generic sense, but in the kind of psychological sense, like how fantasy works. Like there's something sort of more satisfying maybe about magic in some ways, like sort of empowering. And like this book, and again, it is interesting to put this next to Earthsea, right?
Yeah.
Because there's some really odd resonances, and those books are I hate like putting Le Guin in like too much of like sanctifying. Like those books are a very different level of writing, right? In terms of like how they sound, right? There's a sort of poetry to them that's different. Something about the way that there is something in those that, starting with Get as a child, that is just like immediately appealing, even then later to the adult. When he's an adult, when I was reading him as a kid, I feel like, well, I've started with you as a kid. I can kind of imagine growing into someone like you.
Yeah.
Maybe something similar here. I don't know.
For me, at least, my introduction to fantasy was Earthsea, and I didn't know at the time that Ursula lived 2 hours up the road. But her landscape was familiar to me, and so I could just fall into that and know what it looked like. And I think that hugely influenced what I wanted to read after that. Everything I read in my head looks like Oregon in some way, shape, or form. At least when I was a kid, it did. I'd be reading, well, not the one set in deserts, although we do have desert. Like, embarrassing to admit at this day and age, but like reading the Belgariad, they were in Oregon,
Oh, no, that totally makes sense. Yeah.
In my head, they were. I know that author is a terrible person, but I loved those books as a kid. I didn't know anything about him.
I haven't thought about the Belgariad in a long time.
Oh my God, the classic, like the farm boy is the chosen one.
Also has weird horse creatures in the first one, right?
Oh, I think so, yeah.
It's like the carnivorous horse creatures. We've got a strain of horses running through this one.
I mean, I think fantasy writers understandably are like, God, there's so many horses. What can I make up that's like a horse?
What else we want to say about this book, or about the sort of larger world of the sorcerer books?
The sorcerer books. I really did want to reread all of them before I talked to you, but I was afraid it would be, then I'd just be like, but then, and also... You never know when you want to go back to a book that you loved as a kid if it's going to hold up, right? I was a little bit anxious about that because I did remember that as I was looking back at it, that the first thing that happens is her shield mate dies and she leaves her there. And I was like, is this going to wind up being like a very frustrating revisiting? Am I going to be disappointed? But I really wasn't. Like we talked about before, there's this inherent queerness to this book that just seeps into it. There's the treatment of gender. It can sometimes feel a little bit not gender essentialist, but there's, the maiden is one of the religions, and then there's this somebody's of the flame that seems like we want the men to be powerful, and the Norrises versus the Reiki are it's a little bit of like the Norris is cold and powerful and the woman is warm and comforting going on there. But I think partly because of Soroy's role as this warrior woman who kind of like flies against whatever the gender norms for this world would be, we don't really know. So there's like, to me, a little bit of discomfort and uncertainty about gender in this book. But then you get the Cherryh that just switch back and forth at different times. And she obviously was not committed to like a binary traditional version of gender, which was really fun to discover because I didn't notice that when I was 12.
We're kind of circling sort of the qualities of this book that are kind of like hard to quite put a finger on. Mm-hmm. And I think there's something about, we talked about stakes and we talked a lot about like sort of like world building approaches. There's a particular kind of like mid-list thing where it kind of like, it knows what it's doing. It's not trying to be more nor making excuses for what it is.
Yeah.
Right? Like it feels very real. Like it feels like the narrator of this book, whether we want to say Clayton or whether we wanted to say the narrator of this book, takes this all very seriously. But it's also not trying to do something like really epic and huge and, the most serious fantasy book you've ever read kind of thing. It's just kind of like, I have this idea, I have all of these ideas, I'm going to make this secondary world and just take it seriously.
Yeah.
And sort of like read it or not kind of feel to it. It doesn't really it doesn't hold your hand. It doesn't explain things, But if you are interested in these things it's doing, they're there for you and you'll enjoy it. And this way that, I don't know, it feels like a slightly different approach generally to just writing. It might be tied somewhat just to the length and to the publication style and like being able to have a guaranteed trilogy and you can do 3 short books. I don't know, but I really just dug that.
I do too. I it's sort of what you said about the mid list. Like everyone likes to talk about how the mid list is dying, and there is this sort of, I don't want to say an expectation, that sounds too all encompassing, but I do feel like, at least online and the way that discussion about books happens, there's often a sort of leaning towards like, well, is this the book? Is this the important book? Is this the star book of the year? What's the star book of the year? What are we all going to talk about? An easy example for this is the Oscars. I love it when there's no movie that dominates the Oscars. I want like 12 movies to win 2 Oscars apiece instead of it being just like one movie that is, except for this year, Sinners should win everything.
Right.
But generally speaking, I think it's so much more interesting when there's a lot of things being talked about than one dominant thing. And this feels like of an era where like, what now I want to know, I should have looked this up. What was the dominant fantasy novel in 1982? Like what was the biggest fantasy book out there? And where did this fit into that? Like, I think somewhere in here or online, there's like the Diadem book sold more than 1 million copies. And I was like, well, there were 9 books, but that's still a lot of copies. It just, it feels so of a different era where maybe the expectations were different. Maybe, I don't know how they were like marketing books in 1982. Did they just send them to Walden Books and B&N and hope people pick them up? It doesn't even have the little back ads for 5 other DAW books.
Right. I know.
It just feels like, it sort of feels like time travel to read books like this that don't have the same cloud of expectations and awareness. Like sometimes I just want everyone else to get out of my head, but I'm far too online for that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I haven't thought much about how much that, because I'm always thinking about like, oh man, like am I too obsessed with like the award lists? Am I too obsessed with like putting together my best of, and ranking what I read this year? But I hadn't thought that much about how that also impacts like book production and that we're all in each other's heads more.
Mm-hmm.
And these are just out there. I don't have any like concrete thoughts about it, but I've just been so mourning the death of the mass market.
Yeah.
Which is like fairly nail in the coffin, right, as of like this month. And just that sort of, I don't want to over-valorize it because it was just like cheap books, cheaply produced, but it has this, I don't know, egalitarian kind of approach to just throw stuff out there. You can afford it. It's not a big investment. You can pick up a book and not be bummed if you hate it. And conversely, if you love it, you can buy 20 more for the price of a fancy sandwich. Yeah.
And I think that part of what you said there is cheap. Like, I don't want to say books are cheap because artists deserve to live and everybody should have a great income and not, be struggling in this crazy billionaire country. But there is that accessibility question, right? Like, yes, you can go to the library, but the library doesn't have all the books. Yes, if you were lucky enough to live in a town with an amazing used bookstore, you can go buy, like, I go to Parallel Worlds, which is this wonderful SFF store in town, and they will sometimes have tables with dollar mass markets out. And I buy stuff I don't need because it's cool and it has a cover with an otter on it or something. I don't think that new books should cost $1 because no one's going to live on that. But I do think that there is a huge gap between, even when I stopped working in a bookstore, mass markets were pushing $10, right?
Right.
But a new paperback was 25, 26. There's a huge difference there in what you can get and how much you can read. And I mean, not to totally oversimplify, but capitalism ruins everything.
And that we don't have like something quite filling in the gap, right? Like there's a novella boom, but novellas aren't cheap, right? Novellas are still 18, 19, 20 bucks.
No, and sometimes they're hardcover, and I'm sorry, but why are we doing that?
I know.
Sorry, Tor.
And then there's, deals on electronic books, but like those are often, first off, like it's really hard to sort through.
Oh my God, I know.
Right? Just like impossible.
I still have that tab open on my laptop for that Terry Pratchett Humble Bundle because I want to read all those books someday. But I'm like, if I buy this, will I actually read them? Or will I just be like, well, I have them all in my iPad?
There's discoverability stuff in just being able to browse physical things and look at the covers. And, I can't remember, someone on Blue Sky was talking about mass markets and pointing out that like one of the things that's really valuable for kids and teenagers is being able to like grab books and pass them around.
Yes.
Right? In a way that's like not tied to electronic devices and supervision. And that you can just, I like this book, I give a copy to my friend. And mass markets are ideal for that.
Absolutely. That was what I did. I mean, I would get my little $25 gift card and go buy 5 books. And I know that was a very long time ago, but we could have the modern day equivalent of that. I wish.
In conclusion, bring back the mid-list and affordable pocket-sized books.
Yes, please.
This is good. This is fun to come to. I'm increasingly kind of interested in this period of fantasy and publishing, because I read a chunk of it. It's sort of like where I came from, but I never looked at it sort of comprehensively. So getting to visit something I hadn't read before, it was fun out of here.
What are your favorite books from this era?
I'm a Cherryh stan all the way. CJ Cherryh.
All of them?
Yeah.
My favorites were the Rusalka series when I was a kid.
Oh, interesting. Okay, cool.
I've never read the big sci-fi ones. I just read the Rusalka books, and then this one called the Paladin.
Oh yeah,
That was a favorite.
That's very in this sort of general zone.
I definitely had a type as a teenager.
Yeah, those, and then I'm trying to think what else were the big ones. I don't know. I just read everything. I have a little separate. I built shelves for just my mass markets, and it's just all this.
You can see mine
kind of
back here. They're also double stacked.
Oh yeah, Yeah. Thanks so much for picking this book. Thanks so much for coming on. This has been great.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This has been really fun. Before
we go, is there anything you want to talk to us about? Maybe something about a foundation or a prize?
Yes, when I'm not writing about books, I am working for the Ursula K. Le Guin Foundation. So often, if you see Ursula posts on social, that's me. Not always, but mostly. And one of the things I do there is administer the Ursula K. Le Guin Prize for Fiction, which is a joy of a job. I absolutely love working on it. And when you listen to this, it will be probably about a month before this year's shortlist gets announced. We aim for mid-June. And it has been really gratifying the last couple of years. This is the 5th year. And in the last year, I've really started to see readers catching on and wanting to read the whole shortlist and bloggers posting about it. And it really makes me happy because the whole point, is to draw attention to these incredible books. So I really hope people keep reading along.
Yeah, no, it's been a really great list. I mean, I love sort of following awards that do different things and tend to generate different shortlists. And the Le Guin thus far has been really, really great. It's not obviously in the can yet, because we don't even know what the shortlist is, but the plan is that we're going to do an episode on the entire shortlist later this year. So yeah, that's the plan.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. Are you going to have are you going to talk about them all? Are you going to have different people talk about the books? How's this going to work?
The plan is that pod favorite and frequent guest Rosanna Pendlebury and I are going to read all of them and talk about them. So that's the plan.
Wonderful. I am not surprised to hear that.
Where else can people find you and your work online, if you want to share it?
People can find me mostly at Reactor and then on Blue Sky. And I have a website that is not very updated, but Blue Sky and the website are both mollytempleton.com.
Well, Molly, thanks so much for joining. Hope you have a lovely day.
Thank you. This has been wonderful. I loved revisiting this childhood favorite that really holds up.
A Meal of Thorns is a podcast from the Ancillary Review of Books, an online magazine founded to address the radical possibilities of criticism, with a focus on speculative fiction, world literature, and utopian impulses. Go to ancillaryreviewofbooks.org for regular reviews, essays, interviews, and more. Our opening poem is by Bartra Hari, translated by John Bruff. Our music is by Giselle Gabriel Garcia. Our artwork is by Rob Patterson at The Ratio Farm. If you'd like to support the podcast and the Ancillary Review of Books, congrats! You may be good. A few different ways you can do that. You can join our Patreon. Throw us a couple bucks a month to keep the podcast and the magazine sustainable. You can hang out with us on Discord, and we've got a few other perks on the way. If you're interested in a book we mentioned on the podcast, buying from the bookshop link in our show notes or at the ARB website gets us a cut. It helps immensely if you just help get the word out about the show. Leaving a review, commenting, or sharing on your platform of choice, that really helps. And it's nice to know you're listening. Questions, suggestions, elaborate compliments, drop us an email at mealofthorns@gmail.com, and you can also follow us on Blue Sky for however long that stays cool, and probably slightly past that. Next time, Gareth Watkins joins to discuss Dempao Torishima's Sisyphean. After that, Premi Mohammed will be on to talk about the fifth head of Cerberus, and pod favorite Dan Hartland returns for an episode on Stand on Zanzibar. Lots of other good stuff on the way. Check the website if you want to read ahead. And one last time, please check out ARB's fundraiser if you haven't. Toss us a couple bucks, help us spread the word. We've got just over a week left. Thanks for listening, and stay critical out there.